It's really a pleasure to be here, and I think we've had quite a bit of lead up, at least a year, to two of the topics that I'm really excited to present and introduce, launch for the very first time today. So you've heard at this same meeting last year from Chairperson Lindsay Warden about the strategic plan and the focus on collaborative communications, and Zhao has alluded to the work that's been done to bring that plan, that directive and guidance from the board of directors to life. So today it's my privilege to introduce to you some advancements in CDCB branding, including the Powered by Mark that you see some information on the table, and a new communication program and materials that will be coming on behalf of the entire industry to help for producers to understand exactly the value of the data that they're contributing to the national database. As Zhao so eloquently said, it is that level of producer contributions, the quality of the data that's coming into the National Cooperator Database that allows us to have the genetic evaluations, the research, the genetic improvement that's really considered the global standard. With it, I think it's very fitting that we're here at World Dairy Expo with the theme, the Golden Age, because having been, it's a bit humbling to hear Katie's introduction and the experience now that I've gained. But as we look at now the excitement and the adoption, the true utilization of genetic and reproductive technologies in new ways that perhaps we had only dreamed of when I started my career. So it's really a golden age in terms of the use of genetics and data for driving decisions, and how that's showing up in some real tangible results on dairy farms, not only here in the US, but worldwide. So today I will be introducing, just really painting a broad picture of the communication strategy and materials that you'll see coming out in early 2025. So we'll give a high level in this meeting. I do want to give a shout out with many of the communicators and outreach folks, marketers that are here today. We have a follow-up meeting at 2 o'clock this afternoon, which is open to any data providers, collaborators, communicators who want to better understand how they can use the CDCB branding and how they can be a part of this industry-wide communication effort to really elevate the understanding, elevate the commitment to the integrated system that creates our research foundation and the genetic evaluations. We will also offer that same communicator-focused session on October 17th in a virtual session for those that aren't here at World Dairy Expo. So please do see Katie or myself for any details about that meeting this afternoon or on October 17th. But here we are in the golden age, and it's only appropriate to note the tremendous legacy, the history, the century-plus work that's really made our legacy system and our status here in global dairy breeding possible. Many in the room could speak more eloquently than I about this history, but it's really empowering and humbling to see that it's that system, those organizations, the legacy that still exists today in this pre-competitive and collaborative space that has created CDCB and has now been stewarding the National Cooperator Database and providing the genetic evaluations now for 11 years after celebrating our 10th anniversary last year. So with this communication effort, we at CDCB, the team, we will be the first to acknowledge that we've been pretty humble. We're not as visible as other entities in the eyes of the dairy producers for whom we serve. And I think some of that humility really goes back to the culture and the spirit of the USDA, the Agile team, and others before that, really working as public servants for the good of the industry. And that same culture still extends today and is very visible. But what we're doing is elevating the producer recognition of what happens with the data that they contribute into the database, what benefits are received across the industry and for their individual herds, and how they can have confidence to continue to submit data, existing phenotypic data, future phenotypic data from potentially new and different data pipelines, and the genomic information that we know has been just an incredible surge. So some of the language and the visuals that I'll show today, this will be common knowledge for many of you, and many of you could speak and do often speak in greater detail. I'm trying to paint a picture for the concepts and the words that we'll use as we're elevating our communications with producer audiences. So when we're speaking about the National Cooperator Database, that's one of the industry's best kept secrets. It is the world's largest database devoted to dairy cattle performance and genetic improvement. There's been a very sophisticated process in place and implemented frequently to assure high quality data. Data in, data out, and quality is paramount. So it's this combination of the high volume of data and the quality and quality assurance that results in those increasingly reliable predictions of genetic merit, allowing dairy producers to continue to improve their herds. Zhao introduced the very important research and development innovation functions of the National Cooperator Database. And it's important that we remember and help producers remember that it is this database that fueled the research that allows us to have more tools than ever before to improve fertility, cow health, now feed efficiency with the feed saved, and in the future, genetic evaluations for methane reduction, and more to come. On farms, it's an easy story to tell when we talk about the improvement in genetics. The chart here is just one of many different ways we could look at it, but this indicates the improvement in milk yield since the 1960s, with that top darker blue group being the improvement that's attributed to genetics, and then as well the improvements that have come through better and consistent management practices, adoption of new information. So we've seen simply a remarkable increase here in the US and abroad in dairy productivity through the combination of genetics, data that drives decisions, and continuous improvement in management. This is a really important story to tell, and we could look at a similar chart, couldn't we, if we were looking at components or fertility and other traits that we've been breeding for. But when I'm not working with CDCB, I have the pleasure of also working with some dairy customers, the retailers or restaurants who are delivering our product, milk and dairy products, to the end consumer. And the understanding of continuous improvement, the understanding of sustainability, increased productivity, making more with less, that's a very important story to tell to our customers, our dairy customers, and the consumers, because they do care about that, and we have the data that shows it. We have the proof. So as we're thinking about our increased communication and visibility with dairy producers, I can't think of a better way than to have fellow dairy producers talking and sharing the story. So we have a sample video for you, the first of what would be several, not all from Mr. Peck, but the first of videos where we'll have dairy producers helping to tell the story about the power of genetics and the power of this pre-competitive system and the genetic evaluation system that we have here in the US. So in a moment, the AV team will play this video. If you don't know Bill Peck, he is the past immediate past chair of the Producer Advisory Committee that is stewarded by CDCB, a very important group in terms of providing grassroots input. And he's a recognized breeder. He and his family welcome stock farms from New York. So if you would please play the video, we'll hear what Mr. Peck has to say.
Well, a priority for the Council on Dairy Cattle Breeding, number one has to be, that people understand it is the gold standard. These are nonpartisan, non-interested parties that are taking this data and doing the research to try and better the industry, not only of Holsteins, but of all dairy breeds. So that's the most important thing, that we have an unbiased view, arbitrator per se, to help us to go in the right direction. Each of us as individual businesses, whether it be me as a farmer or those in the industry, have their own interests at heart. And we need somebody like the Council on Dairy Cattle Breeding kind of bringing all this information in and putting it together in a form that the dairyman can use in an unbiased form.
So there, Bill was talking about the charge and the importance of the Council on Dairy Cattle Breeding. And as we work with other producers to tell the story of the integrated system, we'll work in more about the data that really fuels the system, the collaborative effort, the specific role that each and every of the organizations that are contributing data do provide along the way. As we approach this new communication strategy, we really find ourselves at an interesting intersection, and many of you are living it and driving it each day. So in this intersection, as we seek to really capture the potential, capture the opportunity, and continue this genetic improvement that we in the US are known for, we see this intersection between the legacy system, which is so highly regarded and so robust, empowers our evaluations, and also the integration of benefits of new technologies and new innovation. So we see this, it's a tremendous opportunity, and we're going to hear more about this from both Dr. Miles and Dr. Cole later. But the opportunity with new innovation and technologies to utilize data that can provide new traits, new decision tools that add value and provide solutions for farms. Because as we elevate our communications, we're going to lead with those benefits that are most tangible and most apparent for farms. So the milking speed evaluation, Dr. Miles will share more about later. Mobility and lameness work and helping that very important issue that farms are wrestling with. So there's opportunity, and we're also faced with challenges. There's a reality that some herds have focused less on traditional data sources and services when they invest in new technology like milking equipment and sensors, kind of chasing that shiny new thing that brings some great benefits. And perhaps the monthly testing or other more traditional services don't feel as robust and shiny. And that's the story we're going to help tell and remind of that value. Because when we look, all of us have in common our care and our passion for those genetic evaluations, the research and development. And so when we have less focus on those traditional services, less participation in the traditional services, there is an impact on the flow of phenotypic data into the National Cooperator Database. Yeah. So it really begs the question, and I've already answered it, haven't I? But have we been adequately sharing our story? Yeah. And so the work of the board of directors in the strategic planning, the input from the data providers at the year ago data workshop held in Chicago, input from the producer advisory committee, we know that we have an incredible opportunity to amp up our story. Kind of with those humble roots and that humility, we've been pretty shy about telling it. Telling the story about the value of the integrated system here in the US and the National Dairy Database. So it's a great story, isn't it? Yeah. And you will start to see CDCB and our partners sharing more broadly about the value of the US system. So a bit of background, the specific input that came from the data providers, so DHI affiliates, DRPCs, breed associations, genomic nominators, all had gathered in August of 2023 in Chicago for an intense roll-up-your-sleeves 2-day workshop, really kind of digging into the opportunities and the use of our national cooperator database. And specific to the communications recommendation, here's a summary of the recommendations that came from that group of 100+ people. First, to enhance CDCB visibility and producer engagement. Have a unified collaborator message that is focused on pre-competitive collaboration and that value of data contributions. Target herds that are currently not contributing into the National Cooperator Database or who are not processed through the dairy records processing centers. And provide user-friendly information for producers. And you've heard me say a couple of times, leading with the benefits, the tangible results that are so important for dairy herds. It's so easy to lead with the features, to lead with the methodology, to lead with the processes, and all of that is super important, but that's a bit of like the engine, the back room. We're gonna lead forth with the producer benefits. So you might be wondering now, well, really, Amy, what's the plan here? So I'll paint a big picture, and then, as I said, with our communicator workshop today, we'll dive into more of the details and certainly welcome any comments today during the break or after the meeting. But anytime we start a communication plan or a communication strategy, we have to kind of acknowledge the reality that we're in. It's a great reality. There's also a few challenges. So we're operating in what could be a complex network because there's many different touch points on the farms in terms of the types of organizations and the specific companies that are working on the farms, each getting different pieces of data that come together into the National Cooperator Database. So there is some complexity that clutters our communication a bit. So we're going to work to cut through that together. There's also currently very diverse messages and messengers that go out to producers. Because what dairy farmers see are coming from the AI companies, the media magazines, the DHI reports, the information from the breed associations, the genomic results. So those are coming from several different organizations. As Zhao said, we're going to really work with those consistent messages. Like you hear, I'm not in real estate, but we hear location, 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 right? So in communication, it's repetition, repetition, repetition with consistent, clear messages. So today, one of the first steps we are introducing is the new Powered by CDCB logo. Does this replace the CDCB logo that you're seeing on folks' shirts or on the top of the agendas in the activity reports? No, that's still the organizational logo. The Powered by CDCB logo is to be used when the results from the National Cooperator Database, the genetic evaluations or research results, when those results are being shared and provided to dairy producers and dairy herds. And the reason, there's actually 5 reasons outlined on this card that's also on your tables, but the key reason is so producers who are essential to contributing that data, so that producers know when their genetic evaluations or other results are based on that data that they've contributed into the National Cooperator Database. It's transparent, it's empowering, it holds each of us accountable for the role that we play to provide quality data in and quality results back out that can truly help dairy producers. So powered by CDCB, you will begin to see out and about, and we're humbly asking for support and help from all of those folks who share and publish the genomic results, genetic evaluations, other results from the database to help us in leveraging the power of this integrated system by sharing and using the Powered by CDCB logo. More on that at 2. Our other effort that I'll introduce today is this coordinated promotion and set of materials that's going to emphasize the value of collaboration. So this communication strategy or communication campaign will become visible in early 2025. It is being led by CDCB with great support and leadership of the board of directors and the staff. And we're hoping for your enthusiastic participation as data providers and collaborators in the system, because there is really a win-win for all that are in the cooperation. As I said, we'll lead with the value to dairy herds. The lead story, the lead paragraph in the news will really be about the ability for producers and dairy herds to make more and more rapid dairy improvement through accurate genetic evaluations, data that drives decisions, and research that truly adds value to dairy herds. So just a few examples that you're familiar with, but we need to remind our main customer now and then. There are more genomic tests run every year on heifers. That widespread adoption, really worldwide, in genomic testing as a management selection culling tool in our female population. U.S. genetics continue to be valued worldwide. We've seen the surge year over year and the acceptance, the leadership of U.S. genetic evaluations. According to the latest report, 120 countries using U.S. genetics, importing U.S. genetics, 29 million units of U.S. dairy semen exported per year from the U.S. And this might be more new to some of you, and I think this is about the most exciting information I could see because it's future-looking. This is from a survey that was conducted by Farm Journal in early 2024, just a few short months ago, and they conducted a survey with more than 200 dairy producers, widespread diversity of regions, herd size, management styles. And they have a 24-page report with many different results. It's fascinating reading if you want to Google and download it. Farm Journal, State of U.S. Dairy. But one question in particular really stood out at me. And the question that Farm Journal asked of these dairy producers is, where do you expect to make financial investments in your dairy operation in the next 3 to 5 years? And they had a list of at least 15 different options, and producers could select more than one. So ranking third in the results was this. It's just music to my ears. Producers plan to make genetics and genomic testing investments because they want to improve their herd. 35% of respondents said genetics and genomic testing is an area they plan to make financial investments in the next 5-year forecast. There were also several high-ranking responses, including data for decision-making, data analytics, monitoring and analyzing, improving health, able to monitor and detect health disorders or issues, make better decisions. So for those of us in our room and the part of the industry that we serve, this is really exciting. It's the golden age for genetics and genomics. So as we're thinking through our communication strategy and our campaign, we've also taken a step back to ensure that we have a really fine understanding of what dairy producers see as value in our integrated system in the results from the National Cooperator Database. it's easy to think we have a lot of experience. We've been talking about this for years, but we know what assumptions can do as well. So in any process in our communication strategy, we start with a pretty robust discovery to ensure that we're really kind of hearing from our target audience, in this case, U.S. dairy producers. We're really hearing what's on their mind and what's important to them. So over the past several months, here's a summary of the discovery that our communication team has been doing, all geared to answer the question, what do producers here in the U.S. value about the integrated system? So we've surmised and reviewed existing input from the board of directors with the strategic plan, that data provider workshop I mentioned that was held in August 2023, a quantitative producer survey that was also executed in 2023. Then we've done a series of interviews with dairy producers. And in those interviews, we were really focused on producers that are no longer contributing data into the database. Because we have a better sense as to those who are contributing data and why they're so invested and passionate and continue to do that. But we didn't have as good of a sense about those who have moved to other forms of data or have moved away from our integrated system. So with the support of many DHI affiliates around the country, we were able to hear directly and have one-on-one interviews with producers to really understand their decision making. How do they evaluate return on investment as they're looking at individual cow performance? You know, what's mission critical to them? And using that base of information to understand how we can communicate better and serve their needs that we better understand. We've also done a review of the different materials that are producer-facing and external materials that are currently used around the collaborators and the system to really understand what are the channels that are reaching producers today. You know, how can we work together in this repetition, and consistent call to action in terms of messaging. And we've done, with the help of the CDCB team and technology, really looking at the existing makeup of the national cooperator database. What types of herds are contributing into the system now? What are those demographics? And how do they compare to the national dairy demographics in terms of regions, location, herd size, and other demographic stats. That also gives us some baselines as we approach this reinvigorated communication and call for submissions of data, that it helps us to establish some baselines. Because just like dairy producers are measuring performance, we're going to be measuring performance of our materials and communication as well. We're thankful to the members of the Producer Advisory Committee. I expect a couple of them are in the audience today, but they, along with the Board of Directors, have been involved in kind of pressure testing our ideas and providing input. You know, are the communication messages and channels where we plan to meet people, are those on pace? Yeah. So our focus will be, for 2025, our focus will be on providing awareness of the integrated system and working to integrate additional phenotypic records into the database. So information that was provided by National DHIA at their March annual meeting, at that time there were 3.9 million cows on DHI that provide records into the database. There's an additional 1.5 million cows that go through DHI field service, certified meters, certified labs, but their data is returned directly to the farm and it does not come into the database. So is this an opportunity to boost the phenotypic information in the database? And just as a level set for those that may be less familiar, that's based on about 9.3 cows milking in the US. So today we are introducing a multi-phase communication plan with phase 1 becoming visible in early 2025. We'll spend the next couple of months working with collaborators, getting the materials ready, and really being ready for a launch after the holidays, after inauguration, when folks are going to be more in tune, we expect, to new things. This is also, if you heard the nuances from Zhao's presentation, this will also be in alignment with a few other strategic activities. One, you've heard that there's a group working on data incentives. And so we see a second phase of this campaign would run in parallel with any changes or differences in the incentive program. I'm also aware, as many of you would be, that there's work being done with a herd portal, a new tool that DHI affiliates, NDHIA, CDCB, and others, and this herd portal will be a tool that producers can more easily and conveniently share, understand who's receiving their data, and designate data to different parties. So these materials can be used in parallel with the launch of that herd portal. So our 2025 phase 1 will really be focused on awareness of the current system, the current benefits, and increasing data from among that 1.5 million cows where there is DHI testing but not submission into the National Cooperator Database. And you see some of those subsets. If you're sitting there wondering, how does this impact me? How can I be involved? Getting involved and working with CDCB in terms of increasing data from those groups that are listed there is a fine place to start, and we'll talk more about that. In a broad picture of the communication plan, we break a communication plan into 4 different elements. First of all, the messages or the statements. So we ask and answer questions like, what topics matter to producers? What do we want producers to better understand about the database and our integrated system? What words and phrases will we use consistently? So we are developing a message blueprint, we call it, and that will be accessible to all data collaborators, data providers, to be able to use those consistent, similar messages time and time again. There's a creative element to every communication campaign. So how does our design attract attention, be memorable, and be consistent? Repetition, repetition, repetition. Because we know that dairy producers and really everyone in society is so inundated with messages. And so how do we cut through the clutter and have something that's tangible and relevant? Content is a huge part of any communication strategy. And it's that combination of the messages, the statements, and the creative. And it answers the question, what format are messages delivered? So we are prepared to be providing producer testimonials, as I shared with the one from Bill Peck, the video. Also use of animated videos and infographics. Those are both creative tools that really help us to gradually introduce a complicated process or a more complex network like we have. So introduce those complex topics more gradually and in a fun way that keeps attention. There'll be articles, advertorials, FAQs, all geared and leading with the producer benefits. And then finally, delivery. Once we have this content, the messages and attractive design, how do we amplify our content to dairy producers? So most of the time, we will look at a 4-prong content delivery strategy. Your information in media. There's paid media, pay to play. So when you'll see those advertisements pop up in a newsletter or in banners, or when you're reading through Progressive Dairy or Hordes Dairyman or the Farm Journal publications, the breed publications, paid advertising and paid media. It's becoming more and more of a thing now in our digital world, and it gives us some very good metrics to be able to understand the performance of our communication. And then shared content. And that's where we'll be working with the communicators and outreach folks around the industry messages. In our creative elements, we're choosing to lead with a red, white, and blue. Surmise our reasoning for that. And so really kind of playing up the reputation, the high regard for the US system. And it'll be complementary with many of the organizations involved. Our slogan, which has been tested by the Producer Advisory Committee and others, our slogan will be Data Fuels Genetic Improvement. Producers tell us they like that because it's tangible, it's action-oriented. We can include words like steers, drives, powers, that all feels like we're putting our future into our hands. So when we talk about the integrated system, we'll start a conversation something like this. Dairy farmers continuously improve their herds through innovation. Dairy farmers continuously improve their herds through innovation, management, and genetics. Genetic improvement has been powered by the century-long partnership of producers and many organizations that collect and transmit quality farm data into the National Cooperator Database. U.S. genetic evaluations are the global standard, data-driven, future-focused, increasingly accurate, and unbiased. When farms provide cow and herd data to the national database, they are fueling genetic improvement for generations to come. So it's a top-line message. But any producer I know is going to have some follow-up questions. And that's where we're going to provide more information, articles, advertorials, and such that answer questions like this. What is the National Cooperator Database? How do dairy farms benefit from this asset, from the database? What specific research or management tools have resulted from this collaborative database? How will it help us in the future? What are you working on now? How does the data get from my farm into the evaluations? I tell you, when my colleague Sherry and I did interviews, we heard a lot of producers who were saying, I don't really know where my data goes after it leaves my farm. How do I know if my data is going into the National Cooperator Database? What are the benefits to me and my farm to contribute data? How exactly is it used? Who has access to it? And why should I trust you? Why should I trust how you're using it? And then another question that commonly came up in our interviews is, I'm not sure I understand why we need the phenotypic data anyway. When we're using genomics, it seems all about genomics these days. So that's an important part of the story and the answers that we'll provide. We'll have a content hub that will be available online for all data partners and providers to be able to access the messages, the videos, the infographics, social media posts, kind of a one-stop shop, so you can easily share those materials. So what's next? Early 2025, you'll begin to see more visibility with Data Fuels Genetic Improvement. In the meantime, we'll be working on that content that I described and visiting with many of you about how you can participate, because this truly is a team effort, and I sincerely believe there's a win-win for many of the organizations in this room as we share consistent messages. So how can you participate in this industry-wide effort? For the producers in the room, share with your fellow producers about the power of data and the power of the National Cooperator Database. For the data providers and collaborators, we'd ask you to consider a self-audit of your producer-facing materials. Do you currently have a clear connection between your services and the National Cooperator Database? Are you answering that question that producers have? Is what happens with their data next? Where does it go? How are you describing that? We know that a lot of the communication happens on the farm eyeball to eyeball. So providing tools and materials for field services staff to describe directly to producers how their data is used and the value of the integrated system would be a very helpful initiative. And we'll be asking many of you to partner in the programs to help identify and recruit additional producers who may be using some of the services, but they're not currently submitting their data into the National Cooperator Database. And as I alluded to before, we'll be asking you to share new materials, promotions on your channels in your 2025 content plans and communications. For those that use the results from the National Cooperator Database, the genetic evaluations, genomics, and other results, we ask you to add the new Powered by mark or text. Sometimes we know those, like those sire pages or pedigrees are really information heavy, and you might not be able to add a logo on there, but let's acknowledge with a line of text the Powered by CDCB. So we're giving producers and breeders transparency when the National Cooperator Database is the source of those results. So in summary, the integrated value proposition, our goals, which you'll see coming visible early next year, are to clearly and consistently share the value of what so many in this room and across the industry are doing. Increasing producer data contributions, some specific phenotypic data into the Cooperator Database, and ultimately ensuring the future innovation and genetic innovation that we in the US are known for generations to come.